Most people think silence means weakness. They think if they don't respond immediately, they lose. If they don't defend themselves, they look guilty. If they don't argue back, they surrender. That is the mindset of someone addicted to reaction. True silence is not avoidance. It is strategic non-participation. There are moments when speaking lowers your value. There are moments when explaining empowers your opponent. There are moments when reacting proves emotional dependency. And there are moments when silence shifts the entire balance of power. But here is the problem: most people weaponize silence emotionally, not strategically. They use it to punish, to manipulate, to sulk. That is not power. That is insecurity disguised as restraint. Today we separate emotional silence from controlled silence. Because one weakens you, the other makes you untouchable. The average person believes every statement requires a response. An inspond, a challenge. Respond, an accusation. Defend, a misunderstanding. Clarify immediately. Why? Because they fear narrative loss. They believe if they do not speak, the other person wins. But this belief reveals something deeper: dependence on external perception. When your identity relies on constant defense, you are already on unstable ground. Reaction signals investment. The person who reacts first often cares more. The person who explains more often feels more pressure. The person who argues hardest often fears losing status. Silence interrupts this pattern. When you refuse to respond instantly, you introduce uncertainty. Uncertainty destabilizes emotional aggressors. Many people provoke to extract reaction. They measure power by how easily they can move you emotionally. If a single comment shifts your tone, posture, or tempo, they learn something. You are reachable. Reachability equals vulnerability. Silence removes that feedback. No immediate reaction. No visible irritation. No defensive explanation. The aggressor now operates in informational darkness. They do not know whether you are offended, amused, dismissive, or calculating. That ambiguity unsettles them. However, this only works when silence is composed, not theatrical. If you slam doors, roll your eyes, exaggerate indifference, or withdraw dramatically, you are still reacting. You are simply reacting without words. Strategic silence is quiet in both speech and behavior. Calm breathing, neutral posture, steady eye contact, no rush to fill space. Most people cannot tolerate silence. They rush to break it. They overshare. They backtrack. They soften their stance. Why? Because silence shifts psychological pressure onto the speaker. In negotiation theory, this is well documented. The first person to break silence after a proposal often concedes ground. The same principle applies socially. When someone insults you and you simply observe them, no smirk, no anger, they feel the weight of their own words. Now they must justify themselves. You have shifted the burden of energy. Silence becomes leverage when it is stable, but it becomes weakness when it is avoidance. Avoidance silence comes from fear. Strategic silence comes from control. The difference is internal state. If you are silent because you are overwhelmed, it will show. Micro-expressions, fidgeting, defensive body language. These betray instability. If you are silent because you are choosing not to engage, your body remains composed, and people sense that difference immediately. The first lesson: silence is not about withholding sound. It is about withholding emotional access. If they cannot move you, they cannot manage you. And if they cannot manage you, they cannot dominate you. Conflict is rarely about the surface issue. It is about dominance, validation, territory, ego protection, or emotional discharge. Most conflicts escalate not because of the initial disagreement, but because of reaction loops. One person raises intensity, the other mirrors it. Tone increases, pace increases, emotional volatility compounds. This is contagion psychology. Silence disrupts contagion. When someone attempts to escalate and you do not mirror their energy, you break the feedback cycle. The escalation has nowhere to land, but there is a precise way to do this. First, maintain eye contact briefly, not aggressively, not submissively. Second, keep your posture neutral and grounded. Third, allow a pause before speaking, or choose not to speak at all. The pause alone often forces recalibration. Most people are unconsciously measuring whether they've affected you. If you react immediately, you confirm impact. If you remain steady, they must reassess their strategy. In heated exchanges, silence communicates three things simultaneously. I am not threatened. I am not rushed. I am not emotionally hooked. That combination is destabilizing to someone seeking dominance. However, silence in conflict is not about permanent withdrawal. It is about timing. You allow the emotional spike to burn out. Then, if necessary, you respond slowly, minimally, precisely. Fewer words, lower tone, short sentences. The person who controls tempo controls perceived authority. In high-intensity moments, speed equals emotionality. Slowness equals control. If someone insults you publicly and you immediately defend yourself, you enter their frame. You are now arguing on their stage. But if you pause, look at them and say nothing, the social room shifts. Observers begin analyzing the aggressor instead of you. Why are they so reactive? Why are they so emotional? Silence transfers scrutiny. This is particularly powerful in group settings. Emotional aggressors depend on visible reactions to validate their performance. If you do not provide that performance fuel, they appear excessive. But here is the discipline required. Your silence must not carry visible resentment. If you stew internally, your body will leak tension. And tension invites continued pressure. Conflict silence works only when you are genuinely detached from outcome. That does not mean you do not care about principles. It means you are not dependent on winning the moment. When you are not desperate to win, you are harder to provoke. And when you are hard to provoke, people choose battles more carefully. This is how silent individuals develop reputations. Not loud dominance, not aggressive displays, but calm, unshakable presence. Over time, people test you less, because they learn emotional leverage does not work here. Silence in negotiation is not mystical, it is structural. In negotiation science, silence is one of the most underutilized pressure tools. When an offer is placed on the table, most people rush to fill space. They justify, they soften, they add concessions preemptively. Why? Because silence creates discomfort. Humans are wired to resolve uncertainty. Silence is uncertainty. If you present your position clearly and then stop speaking, the psychological pressure transfers to the other party. They now feel compelled to respond. Often, they reveal more than intended. They explain internal constraints. They expose urgency. They adjust numbers. The first person who speaks after a proposal often negotiates against themselves. Silence also forces cognitive processing. When you speak continuously, you dominate airspace but reduce reflection time. When you stop, the other person must think. Thinking slows emotional decision-making. Slower decisions are often more rational, and rationality favors the composed party. There is another dimension: perceived confidence. People assume that those comfortable with silence are comfortable with their position. If you state your price and immediately begin defending it, you appear unsure. If you state your price and remain relaxed, you signal certainty. Certainty attracts concessions. However, silence must be paired with clarity. Vague positioning plus silence appears confused. Clear positioning plus silence appears confident. The structure is simple: state position. Stop talking. Hold posture. Wait. Do not rescue the other person from discomfort. Let them experience it. Discomfort is not hostility. It is processing pressure. In high-level negotiations, seasoned professionals understand this. They intentionally pause after key statements. Long pauses, measured breathing, minimal facial expression. They are not unsure. They are letting silence do work. But Mizzou's silence, for example, as a bluff without preparation, and it collapses. If you are unprepared and rely on silence to compensate, experienced negotiators will read hesitation. Silence magnifies what is underneath. If underneath is certainty, it amplifies authority. If underneath is insecurity, it amplifies doubt. That is why silence is not a trick, it is an amplifier. Next section: silence is powerful, but it is not universally superior. Used incorrectly, it damages credibility, erodes trust, and signals avoidance. The first failure case when clarity is required. If expectations are unclear and you remain silent, you create confusion. In leadership contexts, silence during ambiguity does not communicate strength. It communicates incompetence. Authority requires selective communication, not permanent withholding. Second failure case: when accountability is necessary. If you make an error and choose silence instead of acknowledgement, observers interpret that as evasion. Strategic individuals understand when to speak precisely to stabilize reputation. Silence is power only when it is optional. If you are silent because you lack an answer, lack courage, or lack preparation, it shows. People are highly sensitive to incongruence between posture and internal state. Third failure case: relational intimacy. In close relationships, chronic silence during conflict can register as emotional withdrawal. When someone seeks resolution and receives nothing, they interpret distance as indifference. Silence in negotiation creates pressure. Silence in partnership can create insecurity. Context determines meaning. Fourth failure case: overuse. If you respond to everything with stoic quiet, you become unreadable to the point of social isolation. Humans rely on feedback loops. Complete opacity reduces connection. Strategic silence is intermittent, not constant. It appears when tension rises. It appears when provoked. It appears when leverage is needed, but it disappears when clarity, warmth, or alignment is required. The core principle: silence is a tool, not an identity. Those who try to be the silent type often overcorrect. They suppress expression instead of regulating it. Suppression builds internal pressure, and that pressure leaks out through passive aggression or delayed emotional explosions. True control is flexible. You can speak fully when needed. You can remain silent when beneficial. You are not trapped in either mode. The moment silence becomes ego-driven, I will show them by ignoring them, it loses strategic value. Now it is emotional retaliation, and retaliation always reveals investment. Silence works only when you genuinely do not require validation. If you are waiting for them to chase you, notice you, apologize first. Your silence is still negotiation for attention. Strategic silence does not wait for reaction. It simply relocates energy elsewhere. The difference is subtle but decisive. It is controlling information flow. Humans constantly gather data, tone shifts, micro-expressions, verbal pacing, emotional leakage. From these signals they assess leverage. If they know what angers you, they can trigger you. If they know what flatters you, they can manipulate you. If they know what threatens you, they can destabilize you. Unreadability limits this data extraction. Becoming unreadable does not mean emotionless. It means emotionally disciplined. You feel, but you do not broadcast. You process internally before expressing externally. One method: response delay. Even when you intend to respond, insert a small pause. This disrupts impulsivity and prevents predictable reaction patterns. Another method: controlled facial neutrality during tension. Not blank, neutral. Another method: information minimalism. You do not reveal long-term plans casually. You do not overshare insecurities to those who have not earned trust. You do not narrate every thought. Information is leverage. Silence protects leverage. However, unreadability must coexist with competence. If you are silent and ineffective, you become irrelevant. If you are silent and effective, you become intriguing. Intrigue creates gravity. People lean in toward what they cannot fully decode. This does not require theatrics. In fact, the more natural it appears, the stronger the effect. You answer what is asked, but nothing more. You maintain steady rhythm, regardless of emotional attempts to shift it. You reveal emotion intentionally, not reflexively. Over time, something interesting happens. People stop trying to push you emotionally. They test less. They speculate more. Speculation increases perceived depth. Perceived depth increases respect, and respect reduces confrontation. This is not manipulation, it is containment. When your emotional system is contained, external systems lose influence over it, and influence is the true battlefield. Ultimately, silence is not about winning arguments. It is about mastering presence. Presence is your baseline energy entering any environment. Most people's presence fluctuates based on external stimuli. Praise lifts them. Criticism lowers them. Attention excites them. Exclusion unsettles them. Their state is externally regulated. Controlled presence reverses this. Your internal state remains primary. External input becomes secondary. Silence is one expression of that regulation. You do not rush to respond because you are not rushed internally. You do not over-explain because you are not internally threatened. You do not escalate because you are not internally unstable. This discipline requires daily calibration, emotional awareness, impulse control, breathing regulation, deliberate pacing. It is psychological conditioning. The goal is not to appear powerful. The goal is to become difficult to destabilize. When people cannot destabilize you, they change strategy. Some retreat. Some respect you. Some attempt subtler approaches, but none find easy entry. Controlled presence also reduces cognitive fatigue. Reactivity drains energy. Constant emotional engagement fragments attention. Silence conserves bandwidth, and conserved bandwidth compounds. You think more clearly, you observe more accurately, you decide more precisely. This is the final truth. Silence is not dominance. Silence is insulation. It protects your nervous system from unnecessary activation. It protects your reputation from impulsive speech. It protects your leverage from emotional leakage. Used properly, it becomes a structural advantage, not loud, not dramatic, not theatrical, just steady. And steady individuals are rarely overthrown.